In a world where glass ceilings are shattered daily, we embarked on the journey of Women in the Making, a show that is dedicated to showcase remarkable journeys of women who refuse to settle for anything less than greatness. We had the quest to bring these stories, and you join me every week with same love and passion. Thank you to each one of you for the intense support and love you have showered. Success isn't about how much money you make, it's about a difference you make in other people's life. This quote by Michelle Obama is perfect to introduce my next guest. She is considered the guru in helping entrepreneurs reach their maximum potential. Not only has she worked in some of the most recognized companies, she is highly respected in the startup ecosystem for her mentorship. Her mission is to close the gender gap and help women build and scale their business. She believes in empowering women and girls to use their voice, talent, and agency to make impactful change happen. Please help me welcome my next guest, Chris Manderino. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today in the finale episode of Women in the Making.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We've always heard stories of resilience. We've heard stories in this show about women who have empowered other women. And today, we're going to do the same. I want to start your journey from your childhood.
Okay.
Your parents were entrepreneurs. They had their own businesses.
They did. They both had their own business.
So I'm assuming it all begins somewhere there. Did your journey also begin in your childhood?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I always had the entrepreneur bug. So I was the kid that would make the lemonade stands or figure out how to, sell something. I had my first job, my actual first job when I was 12 and lied about it and said I was 14 so I could work. But I started babysitting when I was like 9 in order to make money. And my goal was really just to kind of do my own thing and always coming up with new ideas. So that started from my parents, who both own their own businesses.
That's amazing because, a lot of times my parents are doctors by profession, and most of my parents and my side of the family always had their own businesses. So I've never seen my mom and dad doing a 9 to 5, but they were working harder than 9 to 5. And I guess when you see people or your own parents doing their successful businesses, it comes with its share of challenges. While growing up, what kind of challenges did you see?
So for me, I definitely saw my parents working a lot, right? So we weren't the family that did 9 to 5 and went and vacationed in the summer. But my parents both owned their own businesses and both grew their own businesses. So my mom had a daycare, which wound up eventually having 60 kids.
Wow, 60 kids.
Yeah,
that's
so she had employees, and there were kids would come after school, and then there'd be kids during the day that were under 5. And my dad had an excavating business, and then he grew that over the years as well. So we never really took family vacations, and so that's really probably one of the biggest challenges. Is we were always, resilient, and we were probably relatively low middle class. Probably we didn't have any, situations with food insecurity or any of those kind of things, but every dollar that they made went back into the business, right, to sustain that. And so they did that for a really long time until they both decided to sell their businesses.
That's amazing. And what I know, you went to college.
I did, yeah.
So
First
even
person in
coming
my
from
family.
that background, how did your parents support your education?
So honestly, they really didn't. So I'm the first person in my family that went to college. One of the reasons that I'm so passionate about helping women and girls is that where I grew up, it tended to be, people were kind of married at 18 and having babies by 20. And that really just wasn't something that I was interested in at all, right? So when I said I wanted to go to college, that was a big deal, right? Because my parents didn't go and none of their families had ever went. And I'm the oldest cousin, so nobody ever went to college. And so I had saved up my money from the age of 12 when I had that first job in order to be able to go to school. And then I had partial scholarships as well, but I worked 40 hours a week while I was in college as well.
40 hours a
I
week
did,
while
yes.
going to college.
I did, yeah.
I mean, I'm already
I wanted
inspired.
no debt when I got out of school. That was my goal. So, yeah.
A lot of kids do go to college, and it of course depends whether the parents are supporting them or not.
Yep.
But I've not heard this story where a child or a kid or a young girl is working 40 hours to support herself. That's incredible.
Yeah, they were pretty cool. Like and my parents, we had enough money where they could have helped some, but it wasn't something they knew, right? When you were 18, you were on your own. So that was something that they did. I remember the coolest thing ever was my dad, my freshman year, when they dropped me off at college and they helped me get my dorm room set up, which was super small. He handed me like $100 bill. And he's like, this is for emergencies only. And I remember I made it all the way to my junior year. I had never used this $100. I'm like, I'm going to give it back to my dad at graduation. I'm so excited about this, right? I've done this. And then my car broke down on a road trip and I had to use the $100 for emergency money.
God.
But I remember him doing that. And then as a graduation gift, they'd paid for like my car insurance for the next year, which was like a really big deal for me. So I just felt like I'd saved a lot of money for that.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
What was your first car like?
It was a 1982 Cutlass Supreme. Is literally what it was. It was my mom's car that she'd had for probably like 10 years or something, and she was going to get a new one, and so they handed that one down to me.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
What a story. And from college, you landed up working in corporate giants.
I did.
If somebody opens your LinkedIn profile, all they see is accomplishments and accolades, and it comes with so many struggles, victories, triumphs, everything together. Tell us about the first job that you landed after your college.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is a really funny story. So I honestly can't remember the name of the company. My first job after college, I had moved to Chicago, which is where I was dating my now husband in college. So he was a couple years older than me, so he was already there. So I moved to Chicago, and I had gotten this job after college that was selling educational materials to kids, but this is pre-digital because I'm kind of older. So we would take these, like, not encyclopedias, but like this kit into homes, and people would pay us for this kit in order for their kids to learn all sorts of different subjects, math, science, all this kind of stuff. I had that job for 3 months. I was asked to go sell it in kind of like not the best areas of Chicago. And I'm, again, a small town girl, so I'd never really lived in the big city. And I was in the middle of a drug bust one night to the house that I was selling these materials to.
Oh my God.
Yeah, absolutely. And they like raided the house. There was like a SWAT team. They like ushered me out of the house.
Oh no.
And my now father-in-law, who, we weren't engaged at that point, but like we'd been dating for a number of years. My now father-in-law told me that I had to quit that job the next morning. So my very first experience after college was 3 months, like terrible job, terrible situation. But I'd actually I'd sold stuff. So, and that's something I was passionate about. I was always helping my parents with their businesses. And so I knew that I could sell different things. But yes, my first couple of jobs out of college were very bad experiences, for sure.
I mean, you didn't land up going to jail for something you didn't do, so that's
I
the
did
best
not.
part.
Exactly. So that's nice.
So tell us about then, how did you move to one of the corporate giants?
So I was with a company called Trace Miller Rewards in Chicago, and they had multiple businesses under that umbrella. And one of them was Amtrak Vacations. They had a contract with Amtrak, and one was Hyatt Vacations. They had a contract with Hyatt. And essentially we were like the call center and the packaging for these companies. And so I started as the customer service person for Amtrak Vacations, and got hired and got promoted within 3 months because
It's a very interesting job.
Yeah, it was super wild. So I grew at that company when I was really young. This was my early 20s, and had the opportunity to lead both Amtrak Vacations and Hyatt Vacations at that company. And then Expedia. was interested in buying those two particular parts of this company. So I was the only employee they kept in the acquisition of the Hyatt Vacations asset specifically, and that was the impetus for Expedia's basically white label product or private label product, which is now called Expedia Affiliate Network. So that was kind of the impetus and the start of that.
Right.
So, yeah. And so there, I worked remotely in Chicago for a few years until my boss convinced my husband that I should be living in Seattle, that it was a much better place to live than Chicago. And
minus the sun?
Minus the sun. He wasn't really specific about that. But I was traveling once a month anyway after they'd acquired the company. And then I decided that it was worth a try, and my husband was excited to golf more often year-round. That's how they sold him anyway. He doesn't golf much anymore. But then we moved out here, and that was about probably 20 years ago. Moved to Seattle.
And then Seattle is home.
And Seattle is home right now. Yes.
So moving to Expedia, and then you moved to a couple more companies.
Yeah, so I was with Expedia and the Trace Miller about 10 years, and it was early days of Expedia, so that was pretty cool. And then I went to Microsoft for about 9 years as well, and led different divisions there. So, I mean, one of the cool things I got to do is my job at both big companies at Expedia and Microsoft was to kind of like be part of the new thing they were starting, right? So like Expedia was like, hey, we have this new thing. We want to get into call centers and we want to get into white labeling our product. That was new for them, right? At Microsoft, it was, hey, we had to do Windows 7 launch. We'd never done that before. Vista was a failure, right? So go help lead that. And I
remember Vista that you talk about.
I know, it's funny, right? And then I got to do, hey, we need to do advertising at Xbox. And there's the Bing Yahoo thing. So I was always part of the team that would go start something new at one of these big companies, which I really, really enjoyed. And it kind of, fed my entrepreneur bug because it was always new.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the difference is that when you're at a big company, if you fail, and if you run out of money, the company's still going to survive, which is really different than, the startup environment itself.
True.
Yeah.
And, I just thought of a very funny thing. While I was in college, we used to have the floppy disk or drive.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
And I don't think our kids are ever going to be like...
No, they have no idea.
They have no idea what we are talking about. So when you said Vista, my eyes sparkled just thinking about the floppy disk those days.
Yeah.
And the series that we used to do to what people use as USBs or way more fancier things right now. So I guess... I'm not that old, but I still feel like I come from a completely different generation.
Yeah,
There's a huge generation gap right now between now and the next 20 years.
Absolutely, yeah. Along those lines, my son's math teacher sent out something a couple of years ago, so whenever COVID was, and it was a test that they had to take, and it had a picture of an old rotary phone, right? And she said it was the first time officially not a single kid in the class knew what it was.
Wow.
So she's like, that was the moment where she's like, nobody knew what that picture was on this test. So it was interesting. Yeah.
That talks a lot about maybe we should take them to one of the pawn stores.
Right, exactly.
To show there's a lot more that they have not seen in this world.
For sure.
Chris, like you just mentioned, you worked in big corporations, big companies. They come with a full package, a package that you feel content, you feel you have the right insurance, and so much more, the benefits that come along. You decided at some point in your career that you wanted to reject that and move on to become an entrepreneur or support entrepreneurs. Did any of those decisions that you made affect your lifestyle or affect your family life?
Yeah, it definitely did. I mean, I think, look, when you've worked a number of years and you get, what people call the golden handcuffs, right? So you have a good salary, you have, stock options that vest over an amount of time. Those turn to be really good if you're with established companies. When you think like Microsoft, for instance, where I was at when I decided to leave there. So for me, it was really a decision about I felt like my work-life balance was a bit out of whack, right? Where I was doing, 70, 80-hour work weeks. And yes, it was this great package, but I wanted really more flexibility in my life at some point. And the company itself was going through some big changes, right? So things like I used to be able to oversee a very broad amount of things, and now they were focused on wanting you to pick a path. And I'm not really good at picking a path. I feel like I like, just seeing where the winding roads are going to take me. So that's the kind of person that I am. And as far as like impact to my family, we had just bought like a really big house in Seattle. And so it was just 3 of us, right? It's just my husband and my son. And it was a really interesting conversation. So the way it started was I'd met this guy. We were supposed to have coffee, and he was doing a travel startup, and I had travel background, so some people put us in touch, right? We went and met for coffee. At the end of the coffee, I was like, hey, this guy's never going to call me back again. I told him he doesn't need to hire me. He just needs somebody to go buy some keywords or something, right? That's all he needs to do. And he doesn't need to pay somebody like me. And then about a month later, that same guy, and his name's Kirby Winfield, and he reached out to me about a month later and said, hey, I want you to come help me with the problem I have at the company. And I didn't have a lot to do that day at Microsoft, so I decided to do it. And when I got there, he said, like, hey, I'm going to spend the next few hours talking to you about the company. I'd really like you to come be the COO for the company. And I kind of laughed and told him I would probably never do that. But at the end of the day, I went home and talked to my husband, and we really thought about, like, what are some potential changes that we can make or things we can think about in order to take this next step. And so we cut back on things in our life. I was really fortunate that my husband was the person that was home with our son Parker when he was young, and while I was able to kind of grow my career. And we just did like what normal people do when they decide to make cuts back. You don't eat out as much, right? Like you get rid of, somebody that may be cleaning your home or like all those kind of things. You do your own yard work, etc. Right? So we cut way back in order to do this. I took like a 70% pay cut.
That's huge.
In order to do the startup, because I really, was passionate about, really trying something and being part of something that didn't have, the cushion of like a big company behind it. So it was great. And the first startup that I was part of, we were really fortunate, right? Within probably like 10 months that I joined, we wound up selling the startup, and we're really, it was really positive and really exciting, and that wound up working out for everybody involved.
That's so exciting. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of women who are watching you today are truly, truly empowered, inspired, because I think it takes a lot to, remove that little cushion, like you said, from your entire lifestyle. And it takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
Because if you have a kid, you have a family, you've just bought a house, like you said.
Yeah.
It comes with a lot of challenges. And for you to make that decision and also be successful in that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. Like, I feel like we got lucky, right? Like, the majority of startups fail, right? That is something that you really have to think about. So I encourage people to have a little bit of cushion when they're, going to start something like this. And then they have to honestly know what's important to them, right? At the end of the day, my husband and I are like, well, if we have to sell the house in order to do this, we're okay with that, right? It's just the 3 of us. Like, I mean, my kid plays sports all day long anyway, so we were literally never home. Right. And so as my journey continued in the startup space, we actually completely changed our lives. Right. So we started talking about how, like, why do we have this big house, and why do we need 2 cars, and like just all these why questions, when really all we do is go to kids' sporting events every single day. Right. So we completely redid our life. Right. We wound up. And by the way, I was fine. Like, we didn't financially have to do this, but it made us really think about what's important to us. This idea of not having like tons and tons of money at your disposal, basically. And we wound up selling our big house, moving into like a 2-bedroom, like 1,000 square foot apartment, because we wanted to be able to travel a little bit more. We wanted to be around for our son, who, once they become a mid-teenager, they don't even talk to you anymore. And so we really made a lot of changes. We went down to 1 car because we're like, well, I'll just just take the bus when I go into Seattle, right? I started mentoring like, I don't know, 2 or 3 young women. And then it became so large that it wound up being 50 young women over the course of a year. And so then they could only take a slot like, twice a week kind of thing. And
that is so interesting.
But it was so exciting, right? To just like really get to talk to them about their stories and what they wanted to do, and, not making the same mistakes that I did, and helping them understand they don't need all this stuff in their life. And so that was kind of the impetus into my journey on really focusing on, women and their journey. Because before that,
that's very rare. Let me tell you, we don't hear about downsizing as much as we hear of upgrading and upselling. And because we live in a world where people need to imitate others. They do not understand the power to be self-controlled when you do not need it.
Yeah, you don't need any of that.
So I learned a lot from you because, to be honest, I've cut down some people from my life.
Yeah.
Chris, what advice do you have for the aspiring women who are currently having a beautiful job, the perfect cushion life, but they want to be the next big entrepreneurs?
Yeah.
It, like you said, it comes with a share of challenges, and it comes with a lot of courage. But what would be your advice to them?
Be fearless. Do it. I mean, life's too short, right? Like, I think that, like, you can always go back. Like, people don't actually realize that. You can always go back. Absolutely. And so I think being fearless is the incentive that we should all live by, right? Like, just be willing to try something new and be okay if it doesn't work, right? Like, tons of entrepreneurs are on their second, failed startup, and maybe their third one's the one that hits. Or I think it's just, if you want the ability to basically bet on yourself, right? You're betting on yourself in this case, which is really different than hoping the company gives you the promotion, or hoping that you say the right thing in a big meeting in order to, like, break the glass ceiling. Like, instead, just be fearless and bet on yourself. That's what I tell every woman that is interested in this path. Like, if you have an idea, go for it, and surround yourself with people that can help you get there.
I love that. Thank you so much for bringing that wisdom, because I know how fear feels like and how fear looks like. And fear is never going to go away. Let me tell you that. No matter what you do, every moment I sit here, I have the fear, because I feel there is somebody else who's more knowledgeable than me. So the fear is never going to go away, but you got to live with that fear, control it, and then move on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You're involved not only in your own venture, but you are such a big support system for so many women organizations around. Tell us, how do you divide your time in order to make sure you're giving the best of both worlds to everywhere?
Yeah. So for me, I have a real philosophy now, and that took me some time to get to, which is half of my week is spent on ventures that generate money for me and my family, right? And so we'll talk about those in another session. But really, the other half of my time is this philosophy of giving back, right? Or paying it forward, right? And so I'm involved in different organizations that I want to think about things kind of multi-generationally, right? Because I'm at the phase of my life that I can give back, whether that's in time or investment in women-owned businesses, or, advising them, or sitting on boards, or those things. So I tend to have, again, the paid services for half the week and the give back for the other part of the week. And that takes a variety of different things. I'm currently on the board for Be Bold for Change, which is, again, this idea of multi-generational support for women and girls, and starting with, programs for girls as young as middle school and high school, how we support, working moms and what that looks like. And then again, for those of us that are later in our career, being able to put, our time and money behind these initiatives to kind of just keep the flywheel going. So that's really important to me. And then also, just where I, invest my dollars. Like, if I'm going to invest in a startup, or invest my time, if I'm going to be a mentor for programs that, really focus on making sure that, at least half of their cohorts or organizations or things that they support are centered around, women founders. So that's really important to me. So that's kind of how I think about it, is I have a very specific, at least 20 hours a week is this, and at least 20 hours of the week is the give back component.
Life happens,
Life
things
happens.
happen,
Yeah.
you have a family.
I do.
So how does all of this incorporate your support for the family?
So, look, I mean, one of the biggest pieces of advice I can ever give anybody, I think man or woman, is, pick your partner wisely, right? And so I wouldn't be able to do a lot of the things that I do if I didn't have a really amazing husband. And he works now, so it's not like when our son was younger, but we really just kind of make it happen. And again, we downsized our life to make sure that we have certain things that are important to us. So, for instance, we're at every game, right? Like I was a coach for his baseball team. Like those are the things that are important to me. And so if it means I have to maybe hop on at 9:00 at night in order to get back to a client or maybe one of the questions from a board that I'm on, it's worth the trade-off to be able to do these things with my son. And he's 14 now. So I'm super at the age where he's pretty much done talking to me, and it was worth it, right? So now, again, I'm at a place where when he spends time with his friends and he has a lot more freedom now, that means maybe I can lean in more to, the women's side of things that's really important to me. So I don't think we should think about having it all. I think it's really about, having what you want at that particular moment, right? So again, when he was younger, I wanted to lean in. As he's becoming more of a teenager, I can lean out a little bit and he can do his own things. But having that right partner, look, my husband cooks, and thankfully I do not have to cook the meals because we would starve if I had to cook. That is not a skill set that I have very well. I can make macaroni and cheese. That's about it. And I can boil water.
That is so nice.
But yeah, so that's one of the ways that I can do that. And then again, just simplifying your life and making sure that you're not doing 20 things that don't matter or interacting with 20 people that aren't going to make you fulfilled is important. So I think you have to make those real choices and real trade-offs.
I love how you mentioned your husband.
Yeah, he's great.
While we are here for women empowerment and all of that, I want to take a moment to thank all the spouses.
Oh, for sure. Couldn't do it without them.
For being what you are doing and being supportive and just being around for all of us, because if not for them, life would be a little more difficult. So anybody who has them, please go and thank them today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And let's talk a little more about the on-demand leadership or the mentorship program for women.
Okay.
A lot of women step into a new shape of their life, which is being an entrepreneur, or it could be just as simple as a career change.
Yeah.
I have noticed that myself when I did not have a mentor. Life is hard and it can get rough and it can get fiercely competitive. How would you advise for these women on looking back at the leadership support or the mentorship programs available?
So again, I think figuring out what it is you need at any given time is important. So some people approach the idea of mentorship, and I even would say sponsorship is even more valuable than mentorship, right? Like somebody that's actually going to go to bat for you, not just like, hey, we'll meet once a week and chat through your list of stuff. So I'm a big fan of sponsorship, but the idea that if you're 31 and have a 2-year-old at home, the mentor you need is going to be different than if you're 51 and transitioning into a different phase of your career, or if you're 22 and just graduated college. So you don't need one person to be your mentor. You can pick a lot of people that bring different things to your life. And that could be personal things, that could be work things, that could be hobby related things. That could be somebody who's in a position of where you want to be in 5 years, right? Or that could be somebody that helps you figure out just what to do next, right? So I think that finding the right person that's going to be an advocate for you in the future and not just for this little moment in time, I think is really, really critical. And women should invest in that in themselves, right? Just like they invest in a good pair of tennis shoes to go for a run, right? They should invest in having the relationship that's going to be fulfilling and bring them what they need whenever they need it, right? And not transactional necessarily.
That is so valuable. Thank you. I want to end the segment by reading out something. the mark of a true leader or a mentor is someone who sees potential in others before they see it in themselves. And leaders do not create followers, they just create more leaders. And if you have a leader like Chris, your life will change, so go find them. You recently launched Amelia Network.
Mm-hmm.
Can you share how this supports women in their entrepreneur journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, as I've been working through my career, I realized that I started to become a little bit angry at the lack of funding and the lack of opportunity for women entrepreneurs, right? So I think the newest stat is it's 1.9% of all venture capital goes to women, even though they're creating 50% of the companies.
1.9%.
Yeah. So it's sad and it's just wrong, right? And so, while I can't support as many women as I would like from dollars, right? I'm not a multimillionaire or anything like that. I can do it in a way that allows them to help grow their business so they can support themselves, right? Like we're not all of a sudden just going to make that 1.9 number go to 10 or 50, which is where it should be. But we can do other things in our power to make ourselves self-sufficient, right? Like not every startup has to be venture backed. I mean, I hope they can in some capacities. It allows them to grow faster. But in others, it's about how do I grow my business organically in a way that's, profitable and sustainable. And so that is what Amelia Network is focused on, right? We bring a group of women CEO and founders into a cohort for a year, and the goal is to actually grow their businesses. And so we do everything with bringing special speakers on topics that they curate. They decide what the topics are they want to speak about. So it's not a predefined accelerator or anything like that. And we specifically have goals. So they are accountable to hitting the goals for their company in order to drive their momentum forward. Sometimes that's revenue, sometimes that's people growth, sometimes that's new markets. So whatever their growth indicator is, that's what we're focused on for the year for them. And it was just something that, I'd been in previous women's groups, and frankly, there's a billion women's groups out there. There really are. There's a billion women's groups out there. And so I would say first is go somewhere that you feel supported, that's going to, help you, move forward. But second is the one difference for Amelia Network, at least that I've seen, is that it really is about accountability and it really is about growth of your company. It's really about like, hey, I saw that you said you were going to, start a new channel, advertising channel 2 weeks from now, and you didn't do it. Like, why didn't you do it? How can I help you? How do I unblock that? How do I introduce you to somebody else? So it's really very measurable and actionable, the program, and very focused, right? We only take 10 women in the larger cohort, but we have kind of, we can take a few more in the small cohort. So we have the first cohort is you're trying to make your first million, right? You've already started making some revenue, but you're trying to get your first million. Then the second cohort is about how do you go from $1 million to 20 million? Like that's what we're really focused on to help them drive revenue growth for their companies. Yeah.
There are so many organizations and companies who do this. There are masterminds.
Yep.
Multiple of them.
Yep.
I don't know, thousands of them.
Yeah.
And as a woman entrepreneur or a new founder, it can get very complex and very confusing to pick one, like you said.
It can. Yeah.
And tell us, what should a woman or a man look for in finding that perfect match, that perfect stride?
Yeah. Again, I think you need to look for what you want to get out of the experience, right? So if you need to raise capital right now, then you need to be going with something that has you're getting in front of investors and they're helping you with your pitch deck and they're doing demo days in order for you to get investment, right? If you're looking for growing revenue and having accountability, something like Amelia Network is the way to go, right? It's lonely at the top, especially for women entrepreneurs or solopreneurs,
I'm
right?
so glad you said that.
Yeah, it's hard, and they need somebody else to talk to. Many women don't have maybe a strong co-founder, or they don't have maybe even a second person in their organization that has the strategy or the leadership thinking, and this gives them a whole cohort of people that are willing to support their business moving forward, and they all they all share that vision together. So finding what you need at that moment in time is more important than aligning yourself to a big name, accelerator or company or anything like that. And you should talk to the people behind it. don't just blindly send in your stuff, right? Like you want to know who you're going to be interacting with. What kind of people are they going to bring to the table for you? What are you going to learn? This is an investment of your time and in some cases your money, right? So make sure that you're going to get what you want out of the experience. And there should be a person behind the submission form, right? And if they're not willing to talk to you until you put money down, I mean, you should just be asking yourself if that's worth it or not.
Absolutely. That is so relevant and that's very insightful. Thank you for sharing. How did you think about the name Amelia? How does it resonate with your life?
So this was, I'm not going to lie, this was a process when I'm like, hey, because I beta tested the program for a year and we called it just the Women's CEO Group, which was really, was really boring and all of that. And so I had lunch with a friend who is very recently just passed, unfortunately. And she was the one that convinced me that this was the most boring name for my group ever and that I should come up with ideas and that this should be my next entrepreneur journey is building Amelia Network. And so I kind of sent a list of ideas out to the women in the group, right? The women that are already participating in this program and being like, hey, here's some ideas I like. And, they're the typical stuff, right? I'm a Leo, so I was like, maybe Leo Network, or maybe like the stars, maybe North Star, or like all these things that were just like this whole list. And then one I had on there was Amelia Network. And I happened to write in the emails to the women in the group the story about why Amelia Network. And when I was a young kid, again, really focused on like what I want to be when I grow up. And, I don't know, a lot of little girls want to be singers or actresses or all these things. And that was wonderful for me too. But I was convinced I was going to be a pilot and then I was going to be an astronaut. 100%. I mean,
I didn't know that part of your story.
Oh my gosh. Well, I had like airplanes all over my room. So it was either airplanes, sports, or rockets. Like that was my room. So I was quite the tomboy, but I was convinced I was going to go to space someday. And I had to be a pilot first in order to fly the space shuttle. So that's what I was doing. And so I was really fascinated with Amelia Earhart as a child. And so that is where the name came from is I was just, I would research stuff about like why her plane went down and like all this stuff. And I'm still fascinated by that today when they have new information coming out, right? That she maybe survived and all these things. So that was the impetus behind Amelia Network.
She's still floating in the space.
And so universally, all the women across the group and even like another 25 women I put it out to were universally, they're like, that's the name. You have the story behind it. It's passionate for you. And so that's
beautiful. I absolutely love the fact that we even discussed how this name came because I would have not learned that you wanted to be an astronaut.
For sure.
To end this segment, I feel a lot of women, are driven by success. And it becomes like a fire igniting passion for them. But I want to let them know that success is not driven by outrunning their competition because I know a lot of women who are constantly focused on their competition. But it's about overcoming your doubts and fears. And this is the way. It's like a little driveway to that success where you get to meet in cohorts or mentorship or support system like that, where you're going to overcome your fears and your doubts. And it's not about competing. You have to compete with your own self.
That's right. I mean, as women, we just shouldn't be competitive with each other, right? Like, again, 1.9% of the VC capital in the world, right?
That's huge.
And frankly, there's tons of research around how women-owned businesses or boards that have more gender diversity on them outperform other businesses. Like, this is real information, right? And so what we should all be supporting each other and making sure that, all boats float, right? Like we all rise to the top when we're supporting each other. And what's crazy is that like by nature, that's what we want to do, right? Like we are very social creatures, right? Like we want to be around people. It's the idea of, we say like it takes a village to raise a family. Well, it's the same in entrepreneurship. It takes a village. You have to have people around you that are going to, help you succeed. And so I think that that's a big lesson as women. I do feel like it's better. I feel like it used to be, when I first started working 30 years ago, like it was competitive, right? There weren't a lot of women doing some of the things I was doing. And it makes me sad to think like there were definitely times in my mind where I was like, hey, I gotta outdo her. But I never said I gotta outdo him. And that's messed up, right? And I never think that way anymore. Now I'm kind of like the opposite. Like I charge men more. to work with me than I do women. For that
I've
reason
seen you in
alone.
action, so I We are at the final segment of the show, and it always makes me sad, but it's also the most exciting segment, which is called the burning questions. So here you go, Chris. Are you ready?
Okay, I think so.
The first
All right.
question, tell us a secret nobody knows about you.
I read a book every single day, right? And I know that sounds crazy, and I know people probably won't believe me, but I really do. The secret is really, because a lot of people know that I read a lot, but the secret is that I read nothing of real substance. Like, to be clear, I read vampires, werewolves, fairies, crazy stories about, like...
I would
so it's
not
all,
have guessed that.
It's all fantasy. So people are constantly asking me...
I thought you were about John Maxwell.
Yeah, no. People constantly ask me, like, what are the best books you've read? And I'm basically just like... They always expect me to say something as it relates to business. And I don't know. I just feel like reading it's the pathway to my getaway, right? I've also visited over 50 countries because when I was a kid, like reading was just the entrance to everything. So that's probably the biggest thing people don't know about me is I actually block off time to read a book every day.
That is so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, my next question. One piece of advice you wish you had received earlier in your career.
Yeah. Enjoy the journey, right? I think so many people, and women especially, they get caught up in the final outcome of something, right? They have checklists, they have to-do lists, they multitask for 400 things in their head for their family, their jobs, all of that. And what nobody really tells you early enough is that like the journey is way more interesting than the end result, right? You just learn so much more. So if I had to go back like that is what I wish somebody would have told me early in my career is, especially as it relates to entrepreneurship and women entrepreneurs, is like the journey is just as fascinating as the end result.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And my last question, if you had to tell your younger self, what advice would you give her today? I wish you had done that.
I feel like where I am now is part of every single decision, failure,
You took in your
accomplishment.
younger days.
Yeah, that like that could happen, right? Like so many of the things that I failed at led me to success later, right? Because I had lessons, and learned all these different pieces. So there's probably, I'm not sure I'd want to tell myself anything because
That's lovely.
then my journey would be different.
Absolutely. And I think like I have a story of my younger self because I came from a background of journalism, but everybody defined my journey. My parents defined my journey and they pushed me into computer technology. And I could not understand any of those languages. When I went to an actual college to learn journalism, they denied the entry to allow me to do journalism because I scored 3 marks less than the actual scoring system. So they defied my career and moved me into advertising.
Wow.
From advertising, I moved to marketing because the money wasn't good. From marketing, I got married and I moved to America where I was not allowed to work for 8 years of my life because I was on a spouse visa. So the country defined my career.
Right.
And after that, when I had the opportunity, I went back to UW and marketing was an in thing. So I learned marketing and I got a job in marketing. But the company could not define my career. And my husband said, hey, you do project management. So I did project management. So I did well in everywhere except listening to myself.
Yeah.
So my advice to anybody who's gone through something similar like me, go back to where you began.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
ask yourself this question. Where did it all begin? Because sometimes it's all connected to the roots. It's connected to just asking yourself one question. You do not have to wait for 20 years like I did.
Yeah.
So do that and do that today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chris, your journey is absolutely empowering, inspirational, and so interesting. I'm so intrigued and thankful that you took the time and the opportunity to come on this show.
Thanks for
I'm
having
sure
me.
anyone who's watching today had, needless to say, invaluable information and the courage to pursue their desires and dreams. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you to all our guests for sharing their remarkable journey with us. As we wrap our season finale, I hope that every story has left an indelible mark on your heart and mind. Stay driven, stay fearless, and remember, you're just one decision away to become a woman in the making. Don't think this is the end. This is the beginning, and watch out for stories, action, and so much more